Welcome to the Glisten podcast. You know, I meet amazing people all the time, and I think to myself, wow, you are so incredible. I think everybody should meet you. And so that's what this podcast is all about. I get to have these incredible conversations, and I want to share them with you because I believe they're either going to make you laugh, cry, be encouraged, really feel like maybe you're not all alone, that there's somebody out there that resonates with what you're going through, or maybe all of those things together. And that is my hope, that you'll be able to be inspired and encouraged and know that God sees you and that He loves you. Welcome to Glisten Podcast. So glad that you are here with us, that you chose to check this out. Today, I'm so excited to share this person with you because she is a dear friend of mine. And she has so many gifts, so many talents. She's a leader, she's a speaker, she's an author, she's a mom, she's a grandma. She has a nickname Wonder Woman because she really is a wonder. You know, God gives us signs and wonders. She's one of those. She's a wonder. So I'm so happy that she's able to be here with us today. But she's written a book called Wired, and she's going to talk about that with us today. And then she's been on a very interesting journey over the past year, a very painful journey. And so I wanted her to come on today and offer hope. Maybe there's somebody out there that's hurting, that's lost a loved one, or that's in a grieving process. And so I want her to share a little bit about her journey with you. But thank you so much for coming on and being with us today. So glad that you are here.
It is my honor to be with you. You are amazing. I think we've known each other for a squillion years, and amazingly, we look the same. It's just that right there is a wonder. It's a miracle of God. I'm grateful for you, and I'm so thankful for this podcast because I've literally watched every single one of them, and I love what you do, and I love that you want to share the connections that God has given to you. I think that's a gift. I don't think people realize what a gift relationships are in our lives. And I personally feel like our relationships are our greatest treasure, more than money, more than fame, more than diamonds that glitter. I think relationships are where God shows us how much He loves us and cares about us. And I love that you handshake your relationships with the world, and you give us access to people that I may never meet personally, but because you've met them and that you've encountered them and they have such greatness on the inside, you just can't keep it to yourself. And that's another reason why I've always loved you, is you are a sharer, as we say. You know, sharing is caring. And I just love that you share your world with the rest of us who sometimes, you know, I just look in your world and I think, oh my Lord, how's she doing all that? So you are also Wonder Woman in my book. But yeah, I'm so honored to be here, and I'm very excited about the people that are joining us. You know, there's people that will tap in the middle of this, fast forward, rewind. And I believe that God has a word for everybody under the sound of our voice right now. I believe God has a word for them.
Agreed. I do too. Well, let's just talk about how I met you. First of all, I met you because you and your husband had the most incredible youth camp for churches I have ever in my life encountered. It was so amazing. And so the first year that we went, I believe it was the very first year that we went, I think like Israel Houghton was leading worship, and I think Lincoln Brewster was there. You guys had your sharers too. You brought in so many different people, and it was just such an incredible time. Our students were deeply touched. I was so deeply touched. I couldn't believe the wisdom that I learned just from you alone. Your personality, you were just like, you're just a light. I mean, you just shine. So we were like, you know, you don't know when you meet people that are leading a big organization or leading something, whether they're going to be friendly or whether they're going to be super busy when you try to approach them. But I think we approached you about, I think there was some kind of keyboard lessons or some kind of something training that you had, and you were just so over the top nice to us and so over the top kind to us. And we were just like, wow, she's awesome. And then you were teaching about marriage and being a wife. And I still use today some of the principles that you taught. And so I'm so, so grateful. So you and your husband, Pastor Danny Chambers, who was just an incredible incredibly gifted worship leader. It's prophetic, like the thing we still to this very day, like I will never stop listening to his music because it meant so much to me at such a pivotal time in my life. And the worship songs just touch the deepest part of who you are. And so, he was on a journey, and we got to see, I'll never forget, years later. So we met you there. And then years later, we fast forward and we were at a church conference and we saw him. And it was almost like we just saw, there's Jesus, like we haven't seen him in so long, and we're so impacted by his worship music and just by him. And we saw him, we were like, and he remembered us, and he was so kind to us. And so we got back in touch that year, and then we just kind of really built deeper relationship. And then you guys invited us to some different events and things. And so we were able to spend some time together. And then last year, tragically, he passed away, and our lives kind of were all rocked. I mean, he touched so many people's lives. It really rocked us. And if you're watching this, maybe you know what it's like to lose a loved one, someone that's very close to you in a sudden way. And you just, or even in an expected way with COVID. I know there's so many people who've lost loved ones to COVID. Even when you're expecting it, it doesn't make it any easier. But when it just really rocked our world. I just was so, it's always so shocking. Like, life has an end date. All of us have an end date. But it just seems so unreal. It doesn't seem like it could happen. So I just would like for you to share maybe some of the things that you've learned, and how you're pressing on, and how you're thriving, and how I'm sure you have incredible days, and I'm sure you still have some really rocky, rough days. And you've been so open on social media. If you're not following her, make sure you follow her on social media, because she's one of the most encouraging follows that you can possibly have. But you've been very open in your journey and sharing, what you've gone through. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I will tell you, Danny and I were married almost 31 years. So that means I was with him most of my life. Last year I turned 50, and he threw me an amazing COVID appropriate surprise party. And if you would have told me, that in just a few weeks he wouldn't be around, I would not have believed you. So September 23rd, 2020, I woke up a widow. I didn't realize, we had no idea. He passed on to heaven, and my life has been completely different ever since. It's amazing, because I haven't really had to bury a lot of people in my family. My parents are still living. My siblings are still alive. Danny's father passed away after a very long journey after a heart attack, and his body and his mind just kind of, shut down over a period of about, 6 years. So by that time, you kind of ask the Lord to go ahead and take him home, So loss is very intricate, and it's full of layers. And grief is also very intricate and full of layers. And you're right, there are days when I wake up, I put my Wonder Woman cape and get my boots on, and I just march forward. And then there's days when I pull the covers over my head and I think, I can't today. I just can't today. And then my dogs basically get me out of bed. So thank God for puppies that lick your face off. But grief is something that is new to me. I have never grieved like this before, even in the midst of different kinds of loss in our life. And so with COVID, I know that there have been, really thousands and thousands of people that have lost their lives through this process. I will tell you that even in the midst of great pain and great tragedy, God is still good and God is still faithful. And that's what I tell myself. That's my self mantra, is God is still good and God is still faithful. And even in the midst of losing what I call my favorite human, #happily ever after, I realized that our life together was really still about living our purpose and finding our purpose in Christ. And a lot of people in the midst of grief and in the midst of loss, they turn away from the very source that can actually get them through it. And that's one thing I have not yet been tempted. I have not yet found myself doubting God. I have questions, and I constantly talk to him all day and all night. He's probably tired of me. I do have questions that I may never have answers for. And I remember having a conversation with the Lord, and telling him, what's my narrative? I don't know. I don't understand this. I don't understand. This was a shock. There were no signs, nothing. It was just woke up a widow. And I just remember thinking, what? I don't know how to help people because I don't even know my own story. And I just don't know. And I heard the Lord say, yes, you do. And I'm arguing with him and I'm saying, I don't know. He said, that's your story. You don't know. And Charlotte, how many of us just don't know? We really don't have the answer. We think we know. We try to know. Sometimes we fake it that we know, but deep down inside, we don't know. The only thing that I do know in this last 10 months is that God is still good and God is still faithful. I've watched him move on behalf of my children and my grandchildren in their deepest pain. We call it God winks, and he just shows up, and it's unbelievable how he keeps showing up, and he'll show up to remind me that I'm not alone. I married Danny when I was 19, and I just turned 51. So I really went from my parents' house to his house. So being in this house alone with my 16-year-old, who's the youngest of 5, has been very interesting. And you kind of go on autopilot, and you find yourself texting, I'll be home at, never mind, doesn't matter, And so the process of grief has brought me to a place of realization that in the end, 100% of humans will die. They will pass. The statistics are alarming. Everybody that's born will die. And that's what the Bible says. It's just shocking when we think we have so much life left, and we think the ones that are living with us, our loved ones, have so much life left, and we feel it's been taken away or it's cut short. That's when we have to sit back and look deep inside and realize God is still good and God is still faithful. And yet for me, I am Silver Lining Sally, and I always see the glass half full. This has been a very unique season for me because even in the midst of this, I still see a glass half full, which drives a lot of people crazy, thinking I'm in denial or I'm an idealist but that's not true. I see the glass half full because I see God as my source, and he doesn't run out, and he never runs out. And one thing I will say in the midst of this is my eyes have been opened to his intentionality in my life, and the little things that I pray about, the little questions that I ask. It's amazing. Sometimes I get an answer and sometimes I don't, but I've stopped bargaining with God. I stopped bargaining with him, saying, if you'll tell me this, I'll do this for you, because it doesn't work. And so I just decided I'm just going to live for him, and I'm going to do the best I can in the season that I'm in. And I'm still going to love ferociously, as my word. And I'm still going to honor, and I'm still going to value humans. And so if I can help them in any way that I can, if I can help you in any way that I can, the person that's watching any way that I can, I want to help you. It's interesting because throughout my life, God has allowed me to connect with different people like he has with you. Those are what we call divine connections. And in this last season, one of the members of our church had lost her husband in 2014. And she was on a trip to Israel. It was when Kathy Lee Gifford and Nicole C. Mullen were with Rabbi Jason preparing and doing their movie and the book and the song and stuff. And she was on the trip with them, and she kept hearing these 3 ladies refer to each other as whisters. And she said, what is a whister? And they said, oh, well, we're all widows. So we're widow sisters. Well, my friend Dina is also a widow, but since then she's remarried. And so found out that there's this thing called Modern Widows Club. And since my husband has passed, I've been introduced to this Modern Widows Club. And it's been really a great support for me because it's a group of women who have walked this path, even though the path for some may be gravel, for some it may be dirt, for some it may be, pavement. We're still on the same path. And some have, walked it a little longer than others. And so they're able to reach back. It's the Mary Elizabeth principle, because there's women that are more experienced and further along in what they're carrying. And I'm new to this new thing that I'm carrying. And God has connected us. And it's really, really, the principle is the same thing as what we do in our churches through our life groups. Our life groups are support groups. And the scripture talks about how when you ask God for forgiveness, he's quick to forgive you. But it says, when you confess your sin to God, he will forgive you. When you confess your sin to one another, there's healing. And so sin is missing the mark. And so, I agree, even in the grief, in the season of grief that I'm in, it's when I share stories, then when I share them in a setting like a life group, there's healing in that. And I found healing in that. And I've also been awakened to a whole world of widows that I was never awakened to. I never, we had people in our church, interestingly enough, in 21 years of pastoring, we really didn't lose a lot of people to death. And I think we had maybe 3 women that became widows, and they were older than I am, some not much and some further along. And they kind of already had plans in place, but we as a church reached out, we supported them. But there's a lot of widows out there that don't have that. And honestly, statistically and alarmingly, this is pre-COVID, which since 2020, the numbers have increased. It's just they're increasing so fast. We don't have the research and the statistics back yet. But up to 2020, research tells us that 2,800 women per day in the U.S. become widows. 2,800. So when I wake up tomorrow, and since I became one, I don't know about you, but when you buy like a certain color car, like if you buy I have a Ford Explorer and it's black, and so I noticed every black Ford Explorer on the road. My daughter had a silver Pontiac, and as soon as she started driving, I noticed every silver Pontiac on the road. I never noticed them before, but once I had one in my life, all of a sudden my eyes were open to the others. It's kind of like when you become a widow, you notice, how many widows are out there. And it's very interesting. Since I became a widow 10 months ago, there are 5 women in my world that have become widows. And God has allowed me to reach back to those women, even though I'm just 10 months into my journey. And I've been able to bring them along this path with me. And I'm real careful not to try to fix their world, because I'm still trying to rebuild mine. So I'm very aware of where I am on this path, but it's been very helpful and very supportive. And, again, it's God is good and God is faithful. The most recent friend of mine, she's 46 and he was 49. And, what we don't realize is 76% of widows are under the age of 59.
Wow.
And so they don't have, a lot of them aren't in their 70s and 80s and have adult children that are ready to take care of them. A lot of them are like me. My children have babies. And so for me to expect my children to take care of me in this season is pretty unrealistic. So that's where friendships and connections in church especially comes in to help reach into our world and help us. But the grieving process has been interesting, because even in the midst of my grief, God keeps showing up. He just puts himself out there. You asked me to share this story, so I will share it.
Yes, share your God wink.
There's so many God winks, but I'll share my favorite and your favorite. Last December, just a few months after my husband passed, I was preparing for Christmas, which, the first year in grief is always the hardest, because you have all those monumental dates, from birthdays to anniversaries to holidays. And it is different. You're sitting at a table and the head of the table is gone and he's not there. Who sits there? Is someone supposed to sit there? There's been families that I heard they put a place setting there in honor of their family member. And for me, I couldn't do that. I couldn't stare at an empty place setting and have a happy Christmas. So I asked my oldest son to sit there, just because biblically rite of passage. I just said, I feel like you're supposed to sit there. And so we're preparing for Christmas, and I went into his closet. I'm in the house. I'm still in the house that we lived in together. I went into his closet and I opened a drawer that he used to keep some information in. I was looking for a piece of information. And as I looked into his drawer, I reached in and I found this tennis bracelet, which was a diamond bracelet that he had given to me probably 20 years ago. I think it was around our 10th anniversary. And I noticed that the diamond bracelet was broken. Well, in my jewelry box, I have a needs repair kind of a section where I put jewelry that, like, not costume jewelry, but, jewelry, right. Nice jewelry pieces, the insured pieces that need repair. Well, I had that in my jewelry box. And it's interesting because when I found it in his, I thought he had to go in and get this out. Like, he intentionally went in and got this bracelet out. And he got this bracelet out because I bet he was going to get it fixed for me and give it to me for Christmas. So I had a meltdown moment, I was very happy and very sad. And then what grief does is it kind of, people say there's stages of grief. And I think that's great if you're trying to counsel somebody through it. But what I've discovered in my experience is the stages of grief can happen all at once. So you can be in denial and angry and surprised and shocked in the very same moment. And I experienced that in this moment. I got really, I just kind of had a little pity party and told the Lord that's not fair, and thanks for letting me see this bracelet. Why, kind of a thing. And kind of complained to him for a little bit, and then just went on. And I thought, I'm not going to tell anybody about this because I don't want my kids to feel sorry for me, and I don't want a pity party. And we're trying to already overcome so many things, right? So just about a week later, I'm in my living room and I'm wrapping Christmas presents. And since Danny passed, I put a Ring camera on my entrances in my house for several reasons. I'm not afraid or anything, but just there's a lot of traffic coming with different things that are going on in my house right now. And I just wanted to have it, I just wanted to have security. And so I'm wrapping these Christmas presents, and all of a sudden I see my Ring goes off, and I have my Apple Watch on, and there's a lady at my door. And it was a lady that used to go to our church, and she's really precious, but it's not somebody that I've had a relationship with for years and years and years and years and years. And so it was kind of like, I wonder why she's at my door. And then I thought, how did she find me? So I opened the door, and she's, hi, I Googled you, which always makes one feel very secure. But it was very obvious that God wanted her at my house because she found me. And I'm not super easy to find when it comes to my house. And so those of you watching, you probably already found me on Google Maps now. But anyway, she's at my door.
I was thinking the same thing.
I know. I'm a little apprehensive to let her in just because, it's just, I don't know, I'm apprehensive. But I feel like the Holy Spirit's like, you need to let her in, Jill. And she's one of those people, she's really precious, right? But she's also a little scattered. And so what would be a 5-minute conversation between Charlotte and Jillian would be about a 50-minute conversation between me and this woman. And I didn't have 50 minutes. And so she says, how much time do you have? And I said, about 5 minutes. And so let me tell you about this lady. I love her so much, right? But she sits down at my dining table and she pulls out what I call a Mary Poppins carpet bag. She reaches in the carpet bag and she pulls out a menorah with candles. And then she pulls out communion. And then she starts pulling out stuff. She's like, okay, we won't have time to do that. We won't have time to do that. And I'm laughing. I'm like, wait, you really thought we were going to do this tonight? Okay, that's so interesting. And I'm getting nervous. I'm kind of getting a little bit anxious. What is she going to do? I just let this woman in my house, and she's nervous too, because she feels like she's been invasive, and it's so crazy. So, we're talking and she's kind of talking in circles. So I finally just look at her and I said, you know what, I'm so grateful that you're here. And I'm sure the Lord brought you here. So if you could just, help me understand, why he brought you here, that would be super wonderful. And so she says, well, to be honest with you, she said, I just felt like the Lord sent me here because he wanted me to give you something. And I said, okay. And so she brings a box out of her carpet bag and she sets it on the dining room table. And I reached for it to open it. And she says, wait. And I thought, okay. And she said, okay, I have to be honest with you. And I said, okay, what is that? She said, I don't think it's from the Lord. And I'm thinking, okay. And she said, I think it's from Danny. I think it's from your husband. And I'm like, oh, okay. So Charlotte, I open the box and it is this tennis bracelet. It is a diamond tennis bracelet. And so that was a God wink for me because nobody knew that my tennis bracelet was broken. People don't often stop by and bring me expensive tennis bracelets. And the fact that it was intentionally just a week after the fact that I found it was kind of like God gave me a God wink, and did I need a God wink to prove that God is there for me? I did not. But did that God wink help me feel in the midst of my pain that God hasn't left me? Yes, it did. Yes. And he's done that throughout this whole process. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in our grief that we're blinded to those God winks and we don't really see him in the moments. And I would encourage you, if you have gone through a great loss or if you've gone through some kind of grief, or if you're grieving right now, I want to encourage you, open your eyes beyond your pain, because you will see the promise of God. You will see the beauty of God. He's around you. He's with you. You aren't alone, but you won't know it until you have those eyes to see it. And that's just one of many. The other thing that I have to tell you is, we were planning the celebration of life, and
let's just say the celebration of life was so amazing. Like, it feels wrong to be like, that was the best funeral, or it's not funeral, celebration of life. But it really was so powerful. It was so powerful. Like the worship, the moment, like you just felt God all over that celebration. It really was a celebration of the incredible man Danny is. Like he literally just dripped with God's love. Like he was just drenched in the Holy Spirit. And it was just so obvious every time you were around him. And so, well, of course, why would a celebration of life not be the same? But it was the most touching, and to see y'all's children up there, just sharing in such magnificent ways. It's like he's just been multiplied, so it was, anyway, so go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I will say this because you paused for a moment. His celebration of life is actually on, it's available on YouTube. We had a lot of people globally that couldn't come in. And I've had people reach out to me and tell me that they've actually felt the presence of God so great at his celebration of life that it's awakened something. I have a neighbor I didn't even know if he was a believer, and he stopped me. He drove all the way, because we did a celebration of life at our pastor, Chris Hodges' Church of the Highlands. And he drove to Alabama, and he stopped me. He said, something's awakened in me after being in this. So I'm just saying, for one person that might need to hear that, you can watch the celebration of life. But, we created these bracelets that we gave out and then we put Hope Giver on them, because when people would ask Danny what he did for a living, he would always say, I'm a hope giver. He was a worship leader. He was a songwriter. He was a pastor, but he was a hope giver. So I have to tell you this, the lady that gave me this bracelet, after she left, I just sat in my living room. Of course I cried. Then I was like, why did it have to be her? Like, she's just so different, she's really sweet, but she's just really different. And then all of a sudden I just started laughing, and I thought, God, you are so funny, because this woman's name was Hope, and she was a hope giver.
Wow.
So his intentionality has been so over the top, and like I said, if you're going through grief right now, I'm going to ask the Lord to just open your eyes to see beyond your pain. I mean, pain is real, and it's something we have to feel. And someone who, like me, who's a silver lining Sally, who always sees the good in things, I try to avoid pain. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to feel it. I mean, I watched the Titanic movie one time. I won't ever watch it again. Mostly because I'm mad that they didn't count the boats and the people on the ship. I think that was a stupid mistake. I want to go back and fix it. I don't understand you people. But it was just so emotional for me that I just don't like to go there. So I watched it. It was great, but I'll watch it again. So with this particular situation, I've had to go through grief. I've had to go through, I've had to actually ride the waves of grief and allow them to take me to a place where I don't think I would end up. I tell a story. You talked about me on social media, and, I felt like the Lord told me to post about my journey, and I really didn't want to, because I'm also a very private person. And I feel like it was a real test for me to be able to share some of the things I've shared, and even talking with my publisher on this new book that we'll get to in a moment. I hashtagged ferociously and forever. And so if you're watching and you want to see my journey, just go to Instagram or Facebook and put in the hashtag ferociously and forever in your search, and it'll pull up my journey. And it's just posts. But one of the stories I tell is we were in Hawaii, and Danny wanted to surf. And he got me a GoPro camera so that I could follow him out and video him surfing. You just got to know my husband. He's just hilarious like that. Well, he's paddling out on his surfboard, and I'm following him, fighting the waves. I'm not on a surfboard. I'm literally just walking and swimming. And, it's a waterproof camera, but I didn't want to lose it in the ocean, because we rented it. And so I'm fighting the waves, fighting the waves. I'm just getting exhausted. He keeps turning around going, are you coming? And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Cuss, cuss, cuss. That's what I want to say. But anyway, I started praying instead, and to let you know, prayers work a little bit better than profanity. Yeah, a lot better. But anyway, so we get out there, and so he gets all the way out to where he's going to go, and he's waiting on me, and I'm fighting these crazy waves, and to the point where I am exhausted. I don't have a fight left in me. And so I remember just kind of giving up, and all of a sudden the wave comes and picks me up, takes me back, and then takes me forward. And probably within about 10 minutes, I was at the exact place that I needed to be. Instead of fighting the waves, I just rode them. And I was crying one day in my grief, and the Lord said, stop fighting the waves. He said, I'm about to take you to a place you've never been, but you have to ride the waves of grief. You'll never get there fighting the waves. You're fighting the vehicle that I'm using to take you to a place I need you to be. And so that's what I do when people say, how are you? I say, I'm just riding the waves. So I'm riding the waves.
Well, you are riding them very well, and I'm just so grateful too that you've shared it, because it's kind of helped. I'm sure that everybody that knows you and knows him, it's helped them to heal, but also people who don't even know you, who don't even they see that and they're like, wow, because you have such a way with words and just the pictures that you share. It's just, so I'm grateful that you share, because it's helped us to heal along with you. But I love all the things that you shared, and we'll put in the comments. We'll figure out the link to the celebration of life. We'll put in the link the Modern Widows. Is it Modern Widows? The Wisters?
Yes, Modern Widows Club. Yes.
So we'll put that in the link as well, because I'm sure there's resources that they probably talk about, and ways to go about doing things that you maybe don't know how to do, or how to handle certain situations. And I'm sure that there's resources and that can help you, because resources are, again, I think people are the greatest resource.
Yes.
You think about you find out about the best restaurants, you find out about the best cleaning products, you find out about the best of everything just through relationship. Really, it's relationship. Right. You find out about those things. And so, yeah, definitely want to share those. But one of the things I will say about you and Pastor Danny, I think, is that you both know who you are. You walk in, he walked in such purpose. He walked in his purpose. He was living his purpose. He touched literally probably millions. I'm imagining millions of lives. He's probably touched with his music, with his heart. He knew what he was called to do. You've known what you've been called to do. You do a lot, but you're an encourager at heart. I think if I had to say one thing that you are such an encourager. And so with purpose, how did you discover what your purpose was? And your new book, Wired, talk to us about Wired, because we're all wired for something. We're all wired for some type of purpose. We're all wired differently, which can cause lots of frustration because you think people should be just like you, right? I want people to think like I think. Why don't they think like I think? But it can cause a lot of frustration, but can also, when you find out how you're wired, it can also give you a lot of hope and a lot of direction and a lot of aha moments. And so talk to us about your book and how you discovered your personality, your purpose.
Well, I will say this. In January of 2020, my husband looked at me and said, you need to write your book. And so I had this book inside of me for a long time. I actually met the founder of People Keys. He's a spiritual father to me, and he developed an entire company, an entire business where he goes around and helps people understand how they're wired. And I studied under him. He actually trained me for over 2 decades. And I had this voracious appetite to understand people. Mostly because when I married my husband, he was completely opposite of me. And I just thought there's got to be something to this. He doesn't wake up in the morning and think I'm going to annoy her on purpose. There's just no way he does that intentionally. And so, and then I started looking around, when you pastor, you meet all different types of people, but then you start to see patterns and things in different people that are similar. So you've got certain groups of people that seem to be extroverted, right? Then you have other people that just seem to be introverted. You have some people that are really results driven. I just want to get to the result. And then there's other people that don't really care about the result. They care about the process and how it's fun or it's not fun. And you have other people that really don't care about that. They just want peace, you know? And so in studying this, I learned a lot about myself and how I'm wired, how my husband was wired. And that enabled me and empowered me to communicate more effectively and connect with him more effectively. You know, he was a D, which is my book is based on the model DISC, which is the DISC model, and it's a lot more simpler than like the Enneagram, which I have my Enneagram candle here on my desk. You just Yay. Can't see it that you sent me, so thank you for that. But it's a little bit more simpler. It's based on your behavior and how you behave. And the whole preface of my book is I want to enlighten people how they're wired, which explains a lot of why they behave the way they do. But it's not, I want to empower you to choose your behavior, not be ruled by your behavior. Mm-hmm. And so this whole book is stories and experiences that I've had throughout my lifetime with marriages, with businesses, even the outreach, some of the outreach we've done as a church. In 2010, our city flooded. Nashville, Tennessee flooded. It was the biggest flood in the history of our state. And we mobilized 300 to 500 volunteers. We put in 10,000 man hours in 3 months. Wow. And I was able to utilize this information to set teams up to go into neighborhoods to help people. And through my understanding of how people are wired, I was able to posture and position people in the right place. So I would put the extroverts, they would knock on the door, and because they're not afraid of anybody. It's an I temperament. They're not afraid of anybody. They're about influence or inspiring. So they would knock on the door and say, hey, I've got a team of people here to help you with flood relief, because most people in these neighborhoods didn't have flood insurance. So it was very important to get to these houses, assess the damage, even rip up floors, tear down sheetrock before mold set in, because mold can be deadly, which is also part of our story. So we had thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, but we had hundreds of people wanting to volunteer, but I needed to put them in the right place. So I had the I's go, they'd knock on the door and they'd say, we're out here. And then I would have a D temperament who was all about results, all about directing, very decisive. They would then walk past the I into the house and start assigning tasks, depending upon what the house looked like. The S's are very supportive. They're there to listen. They're there to help. They're there to serve. They would do anything from sweeping to just listening to the person that's crying, who's suffering this grief over what they potentially lost in their home. And then you have the C's, which are conscientious, very calculated, and they're very task-oriented. They get things done, but they do it correctly. And so I'd have all these people in their place. So I would have most of my C's, I would have them in charge of the paperwork. So the I would knock on the door, we're here to help you. The D would walk in with the rest of the team, assign tasks. The S was very supportive. They would surround and help the owners in whichever way they needed to be helped. But then the C's were responsible to get the owners to sign the liability releases and the paperwork and get it back to me. So each one of those personality styles, when you understand the value of difference, you know where they benefit the entire picture. So having the people in the right place is just as important as having the right people in place. And so you want them in the right place. And even, as a pastor, you're a pastor, people that would come through our membership and our assimilation, you don't want to put an introvert at the door greeting the people coming in the door. So there's little things like that help you understand, oh, I'm wired this way. It's okay for me to be wired this way. I have 5 kids. They're all different. 4 out of my 5 kids have I in them, which means they like to talk, they like to laugh. So basically, our dinner table is full of interruptions. I is also for interruption. And so I also had to explain to my children.
That explains a lot. That explains a lot. That's us too.
Yeah. So I had to explain to my children that, we all have a voice, and I need you to be aware, that other people want to say something, and don't finish their sentence for them and don't interrupt them. Give them a chance to finish their sentence. And the problem is, if you have a slow talker in your group, they don't ever get to finish their sentence because they have the impatient. I is also for impatient. And I say that because I have I in me as well, but my highest letter is S. So most of us are a combination of these 4 letters. And naturally, most of us are a combination of 2 of them. But we can become all of them in the right environment if we need to, because you can choose your behavior. So like when we go to Cambodia, you and me, and listen on a missions trip, and there needs to be a decision made. I actually am an S, an I, and a C on the actual on the actual assessment. But because my S is the highest, and I'm supportive, if there's a decision that needs to be made, it may appear like I'm a D, but I'm actually an S becoming a D because that's what's needed in that moment. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so throughout my life, I had to understand that about myself. I had to understand that I'm not locked in a box of personality, and it's not a crutch for me. It's not something that holds me back because I'm not wired that way. What I discovered through all my studies and research and experiences is I may not naturally want to lead. That's not naturally who I'm wired to be, but I can choose to be a leader because it's my choice. My behavior is my choice. I'm not going to be ruled by my behavior. I'm going to choose my behavior. Naturally, I might be an interrupter. I can choose to be patient and be a listener. It's my choice. So I teach my children, I teach my spiritual, the people I mentor, the people I life coach. I'm like, this is all about choosing your behavior, but you have to recognize it first, right? If you're going to change your behavior, you have to recognize your behavior and what it's like first. So this whole book it's really full of stories. Life experiences. I went skydiving. I know it's crazy. I didn't go bull riding or ride the bull wasn't Fu Manchu or anybody like that, like what Liz Faye's song says. But, there's times in my life right now, the season that I'm in right now, I've had to step up and lead, after being under the headship of a priest of a home for almost 31 years. That's different. It's different. My natural behavior isn't wired to just take over and do this. Even the business of death has been hard because, my husband, he took care of all the bills. He took care of everything. Changing your Hulu, your Netflix, changing your Amazon Prime accounts, all of those things that he was techie. He did all that stuff. And so, it's also helped me go, Jill, you better reach down in there and find that inner D, and you go make those decisions, and you go, you just go do it. So it's a great book. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I always tell people, don't use it as a crutch to, as an excuse for why you behave the way you do. Use it as a bridge so that you can cross over into other people's world and value them, understanding them and value them. Because we all have strengths, right, that we're naturally wired. And then we all have areas of growth. I don't call them weaknesses. I call them areas of growth. So that's an area that I can grow in. I talk a lot about the arena of trust, which is the Johari window, which was developed by 2 men to help us understand how we can communicate effectively. Will secure our connection in relationships. But in order for us to get into an arena of trust, we have to break through the blind spots and we have to take off the masks. And I give examples of how to do that. I also talk about packaging, which is something that anybody that's ever been in my world hears me talk about all the time. And I talk about packaging. We've all been told it's how you say it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's how you say it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. But it's also not just how you say it, it's how they hear it. And I talk about how it's important for us to take on the responsibility to package what we're saying in a way that we know they will hear it the way we want them to hear it. Because a lot of times, if you are, like for instance, a D, your greatest fear is being taken advantage of. You don't want to be taken advantage of. Well, if I know that about you, then I'm going to package what I have to say in such a way that you don't feel taken advantage of, right? So greatest fear is rejection. So if I have to tell you I don't like an idea, I'm going to do it in such a way, I'm going to package it in such a way that you don't feel rejected. You feel like I'm interested in your idea, but I'm interested in your next idea. My mother used to say, I can't wait to hear your next idea.
That's awesome.
Which is code for that's not a good idea. Yeah. So understanding how people are wired will enlighten you and empower you to connect, more effectively. John Maxwell's one of our mentors. You and I share him as a mentor, and he says success is a series of right relationships. And I believe in order for us to have success in the right relationships, we have to recognize the power in those relationships and the difference, and understand that our difference actually empowers us to be stronger. So instead of sitting around talking about how we're different and that be an issue and that be a liability, it can become one of our greatest assets if we understand that our differences helps us see the world bigger and better and fuller.
Yeah, we so need each other. So how we need all the personality types. They all, because they bring that perspective. You know what things look like, and why this person makes decisions the way that they do, and how they're making that decision. And you're like, gosh, I never even thought about looking at it from that angle, and that's going to help us make a better decision. It's why we love, even our church, we do everything we do is team. We don't ever sit around and just make dictatorship decisions. We I'm like, I don't want to. I love consensus. But so if someone's out there and they have not taken the DISC test, do you have a test in your book, or do you recommend a certain place to go to take the DISC?
I do have a test in my book. It's a free test. It's kind of it's a simpler test. If you want a more in-depth test, I will have them available on my website, jillchambers.com, or you can actually go to peoplekeys.com. That's my spiritual mentor and the one who trained me, peoplekeys.com. And there's several assessments. So there's the DISC assessment, but what we use for teams in consulting churches or businesses, there's several other assessments, and combined together, you really get to know someone. So for example, one of the assessments is your value system. And there's 4 quadrants that people kind of come into a category. Either your value is personal freedom. So you really value your personal freedom, which then filters into why and how you make the decisions you make. Loyalty, a lot of people are loyalty. Equality is one of the values that we see. A lot of people that want equal rights for equal staff members, or equal this or equal that. It can work if you understand the power of that value. If it's in the right place, in the right environment, it can be devastating if that person is not in their right place with clarity and understanding. And then justice is another value that we look at. There's also another assessment, which I love to look at, which is basically I help people hire the right person. And what I actually tell them is it's not that the person's not right for the job. It's just the job's not right for the person, because God wired us a specific way. And so what we do is we create a job description, and we want someone to fit the job description. And I flip the script on that, and I say, how about you fall in love with a person, find out what they're good at, and create their job description out of their greatness. So their job description actually spotlights their greatness, rather than them trying to wake up every day, live up to this crazy measurable. That's impossible, because nobody can do all those things. And when I consult people, I help them understand, you are powerful. This is what you're great at. Let's find a place that will fit and that will shine, and that you can actually execute all these great things. And so one of my tools and resources you can find on peoplekeys.com is called the TEAMS assessment, which TEAMS is an acronym, and it stands for theorist, executor, analyst, manager, and strategist. So my husband, being the CEO and visionary of our church, he was a theorist strategist. So basically, his entire day was spent coming up with great ideas. I happened to be all of the others, which I thought was schizophrenic at one point. I actually had to reach out to my mentor and be like, can I be a theorist, an executor, an analyst, a manager, and strategist? He goes, yeah. He goes, you can be all those things. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I feel a little like, is this right? But so I was all the above. So when my husband was, a theorist, and he came up with these ideas, I would help execute, or I would help analyze, or I would help manage that. When we hired people, we didn't need a whole lot of theorist strategists, because I had one already. If you have a bunch of theorist strategists in a room, you're just dreaming all day long. Nothing's getting done. And that's okay if that's really what you want to do. But if you really want to get it done, you need a theorist strategist as a CEO or as the leader. And then you kind of surround them with executors and managers, and, depending upon the job that you're at. So it's really fun. My book, again, the DISC is in my book. It's a free test. And it'll just kind of whet your appetite, because you're going to want to know more about yourself. One thing I've discovered is everybody loves to know more about themselves.
Yes, they do. And I imagine that now that you're so familiar with these, do you look at other people and you're like, I think you're I definitely know you're a D, or I definitely know you're an I definitely know you're an S or a C. So what do you think I am? Because I've taken it multiple times. One time I took it and it said, it's always, the first letter's always been the same, but the second time I took it, it kind of changed a little bit. But what do you think?
Well, I think you're definitely an I. And I think you have S in you because you're very supportive. I think in different environments, I believe you can be both D and C as well. I think that you are, as a first lady of a thriving organization, I'm sure that you're in a circle and find yourself in moments where you are a D. You have to make the decisions because it stops at you. That's the way I was. I think naturally in my natural environment, I think we're a lot the same, which is the S and the I combination. It's interesting too, because you mentioned that, because when you learn to recognize what other people are, that's where the packaging comes in. Because when I'm sitting in a room full of Ds who are all about results, it's not really the appropriate environment to shoot the breeze. These guys are in a hurry. They're probably already thinking about their next meeting. These girls are, their to-do list is ever long. And so sitting around talking about, the weather or whatever is just going to frustrate them, into the corner. However, if you are, walking down the hallway and you've got a whole team full of people, and several of them are I's or S's, you don't want to go straight to your office. You want to stop in and wave, nod. But if you have a C, you recognize that someone's a C, you better know what you're talking about, because they're all about research, stats, statistics, and truth. And so don't bring any information to the table unless you absolutely know. When I say 2,800 women per day become widows, I've researched that. I've looked that up. I've got documentation to back that up. So, when you're talking to a C-type personality, you need to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, just don't mention it, because they will go find out. And with Google in the palm of your hand, in the form of your iPhone or your, Droid, your smartphone, they will be able to look it up. And the problem with that is that they won't trust you. You lose trust equity when you make up stuff. You can always tell the I's because they're usually late. Which is fine in some environments. And usually the S's, it's like, I even talk about the mask. I talk about the COVID in my book, and I talk about the masks and how it's so funny how a D is going to wear a mask if they want to, but if they don't want to, they're not going to. A C will wear it because it's the correct thing to do. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do. It's correct. And I will forget their mask. So the S will have an extra mask because that's what S's do.
That's funny. Yes, you are completely correct. IS was the one that I mostly have tested as, but the last time I took it, it was said ID. I was like, it's probably because I was in D mode or something when I took it. I was in that role, or that I had that responsibility. So I imagine that's why maybe I answered the questions the way that I did. But I definitely can see how you can become all of them, in different, and we need all of them. We need to pull.
Charlotte, it's interesting, this grieving process, understanding how my children are wired and how I'm wired and how we grieve differently, because I told you several of my children are I's, and we seem to look towards our coping mechanism happens to be fun and humor. And that's part of being an I. And so when we're coping, we're trying to find something that will lift off that heaviness from us. And I have a couple of my children that are D and C, and they want us to be more serious. They want us to lean into the serious side of it, and navigating and managing all of these behavioral styles in the midst of grief has also really taught me a lot of lessons about, even just the grieving process. I have a really sweet friend whose husband passed away. He's 49, she's 46. And his mom is a high D, and her grieving process is she wants to control, because Ds need control. And she's grieving through her grief. She's trying to take control of things that she shouldn't be controlling. And so understanding how she's wired has helped me actually have conversations with her about, I'm so sorry, but you can't control this. And I know you're wired to need to have control, but you're not going to be able to control the way this works, the way this outcome is. So when you lose someone, and you feel like that was taken from you out of your control, you actually compensate in grief by trying to take control over things that maybe you're not supposed to take control over. And
Wow,
I've
that's
even seen that with
fascinating.
God, where people want to take control. So they actually try to take control of God, and it doesn't work.
No,
So
that one won't
it's a
work.
lot. It's a lot. We could probably do about 10 episodes on this.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think so. What I hear you say, and what I think everyone maybe needs to know is that this book is something that you definitely need because it's going to help you. It's going to help you understand yourself better. It's going to help you understand the people in your life better. It's going to help you be a better leader, a better supporter, a better, just a better friend, better whatever role you have, because I think it helps. I really think that any kind of personality assessment or any kind of personal assessment helps you to have more empathy for others. Like that's just, and
Yes,
I
I
feel like
agree.
there's such a lack of empathy when there's a lot of division, and I know our nation's been kind of torn apart over this past year. And so on the road to healing, I feel like it's so important for us to have more empathy for one another and to understand different points of view and be able to be respectful and honorable no matter what. And so I think this book is gonna help a lot of people discover their purpose, discover why, this is why I think the way that I do, or this is why I respond the way that I do in certain situations. And this is how I can respond better. This is why that person is doing this. And I feel like it's such an empowering tool. So as we close, I want to ask you this, because you said that you like to have fun. Fun is kind of your coping mechanism. Fun is totally my coping mechanism. And in anything, like I want to make everything fun. Like if I'm going to do the laundry, I'm going to watch a movie while I do the laundry. Like if I've got a whole bunch of folding to do, that's happening. If whatever is hard, I'm going to add an element of fun to it so that I can enjoy it. So what is the most fun thing that you have done that you can think of in the last, and just in the last few years? What is the most fun thing that you can think of that you've done? And don't say
Well,
skydiving.
okay, because that was a long time ago. Um, Gosh, there's a lot of them actually. I'm a prankster, so I like to prank people sometimes. I know it's funny because you would never guess that. Like most people are like, "What?" And so one of the most fun things I did, I have to be honest with you, it was really definitely up there, top 10, was when we were still pastoring our church. Two of my high C personalities and I, believe it or not, I recruited them to play a trick on what we would call our associate pastor. And this was the second prank I played on him because he's a blast. But anyway, and so we had a kitchen, and we had a commercial kitchen at our church because we had a cafe. And we went in and we got the big commercial size foil, and we foiled everything in his office. We covered his desk, his pencil holder, his books, his couch. We went in and we covered everything in foil. And it was just fun. It was just a fun thing. The same person, I don't know, I'm picking on him in this moment, but he also hates feet. He doesn't like feet. Feet freak him out. So I was at an event at the church, dropped my daughter off for this event, and she ended up not really wanting to participate in it. It was not what she thought it was going to be. It was kind of funny, actually. It was younger kids, so she wanted to be the younger kids. So my daughter-in-law stopped by, and we call them daughters in love because it's not just by law. We choose to have them by love. And so the three of us, printed every picture we could find of feet, and we hung it all over this person's office. And we just, we even cut out like we traced our feet and put them all over the floor. And so I know that sounds funny, but I love to do that. I love to lighten the mood. I love to break the tension. There are people that use sarcasm. I'm not a sarcastic person. I feel I have a thing about sarcasm. I just don't like it. But I will bring humor into the situation because I feel like the Bible says laughter is like medicine. So I
It
love to think
is.
of ways to do silly stuff. Creating videos. I mentioned Pastor Chris Hodges is my pastor. I've actually worked for Highlands from Nashville now. So I watched the staff meetings online, and Pastor Lane was doing a staff meeting and he was stuttering. His words were stuttering. So I recorded, screenshotted that. And I put a whole little video montage together and I sent it to him and sent it to a couple staff members. So that is fun to me. I'm very creative. And so I like to use my creativity to, I guess, maybe bring joy to other people. So whatever that looks like. So it's fun. Yeah.
I love it. Well, right before we had this interview, I came into my office and my bathroom, and we have this huge, my husband did this talk a couple of months ago about, he was talking about having the eye of a tiger, and he had Rocky, this big cutout of Rocky, and he decided for whatever reason to put it in my bathroom. So when I opened the door to the bathroom, literally I screamed because it was Rocky was standing in the middle of the bathroom. So then I had to pass it on, and so someone else is going to get pranked today with Rocky, but we'll see how they enjoy their prank. So we'll carry on your prank.
That'll be
Fun. Well, I love you so much. And the last thing I want you to do, just as we are ending the podcast, would you please pray for anyone out there who is maybe struggling with their purpose, or they are struggling with their grief?
Absolutely. When my husband passed away, a lot of my identity was in Mrs. Chambers. And even though I still am Mrs. Chambers, a lot of my identity was found in being Danny's wife. And even though I'm still Danny's wife, I had to discover the fact that my identity is not found in those things. My identity is found in Christ. And so I believe that as we get in Christ, he reveals to us things like our Enneagram. He reveals to us our disc. He reveals to us information. He gives us access to information that will enlighten and empower us to be the best version of ourselves. And so if you're watching right now, I'm not going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. I'm going to ask you to continue looking at me, because I want to look at you with eyes of compassion, eyes of empathy, and the eyes of love, to tell you that you are not an accident. You're not a mistake. You haven't expired. You're not forgotten. You are not devalued, and you're not unimportant. God wired you, and he put you together with precision, intentionality, and he put you on the planet right now during this time, during COVID, during quarantine, during politics, during so much unrest, because there's something on the inside of you that the world needs. And the enemy and the mind monsters have convinced you that nobody's listening and nobody's paying attention. But I'm looking at you right now, and I'm telling you, I may not see you physically, but I see you spiritually. And if I can see you, that means God can see you. And God knows exactly what he wired you and what he purposed for you to do. And so I'm going to encourage you, don't allow the mind monsters to confuse who you are. You know who you are. You're found in Christ. And I also want to pray right now for somebody who has gone through some great loss and you're grieving. And I want to tell you, it will get better. It's not, I read something the other day that it was a widower. He lost his wife several years ago. And he said, although I may never get over it, I'll get through it. And I will tell you, I don't know if I'll ever get over losing my husband. I've never been here before, but I know that with God, all things are possible. I know Romans 8:28 has a promise that he works all things together for good. I don't even sometimes wonder how in the world he's going to do that, but it's those God winks and those heavenly kisses and these divine connections that he just reminds me that even in the greatest season of pain, he's still there. And there's purpose in it. And I hate it when people tell me there's purpose in your pain. I just want to punch them sometimes, but there really is purpose in our pain. And the purpose is that we find out how we're wired. We find our purpose, and then we use it to help other people get through their pain and get through their seasons of grief and their seasons of life. So if you're watching me, I want to encourage you, continue taking those steps. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. And you know what? You'll turn around and you'll realize you're farther than you thought you could ever go. You're stronger than you ever thought you could be. Because no matter what you're facing in life and no matter what you've gone through, even the greatest loss, the ripping away of my happily ever after, I'm telling you, I can look at you in the eye with authenticity, with truth. And I'm just going to be honest with you. God is still good and God is still faithful. And I will tell you that he is there for you. He's with you right now. He will never leave you. He will never abandon you. And so I need you to know, in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your grief, God is still good and God is still faithful.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so, so much. So honored to have you on, and I'm sure we'll have you back again. Love it if you would come. And thank you so much. So thanks for
I love you,
watching.
girl.
Hopefully you will. Oh, I love you. So thanks for watching. So glad that you joined us. Check out next month. We'll have another one ready for you. And we look forward to being able to just share great people with you and great conversations with you. So keep the conversation going. Share this with someone. Share this with someone that might need to hear this encouragement. Share it on social. You can share it on YouTube, all the places. But we just are so grateful that you chose to tune in, and we'll see you next time.